the live event. So, okay, she started the recording, and I'll hand over to her to open the official proceedings.
So for everybody who has arrived this evening, welcome. As you can see from how we have set it up, there's a little bit of a different format this evening. And so we have our speaker, Frank Winter, at the University of Mainz. And so he will be in a talk in the style of an interview with Professor Emich, who is the head of the Department of English Literature and Culture here. And so we will have the privilege of being able to listen to this discussion this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kelly, for opening proceedings. I'm not the head of the department at the moment, but I'm chair of English literature and culture. A small difference, and I'm welcoming here tonight not only our guest, whom I'll introduce in a second, but also Sigrid Rieberts, who I'm usually in this format is actually live in the room with us together. But the guest of honor and the person of interest is Frank Winter, opposite me, who was born in Karlsruhe, am I allowed to say the
yes,
year? In 1963, studied German, sociology and philosophy at and holds an MA in those subjects from Goethe University, Frankfurt, which is also my academic starting point, where he also now lives in Frankfurt. And he works as a freelance journalist and author, writing about Scotland, food and drink, and also his home region, Baden in southern Germany. I think we have 39 or 38 books by you by now, something
more like 13.
Well,
thank you very much.
I thought there were even more, but we have a focus tonight on his Scottish crime novels, about which I'll say something in a second. But in order to show you that he's not just an amateur in the fields that he's writing about, he has been awarded the silver medal of the Gastronomical Academy of Germany for his book Schottisch Kochen, Cooking the Scottish Way. Here it is. And the renowned international award for a wonderfully titled book called Marmalade Mania. As you can guess, it's about marmalades and jam. So he is a cookery book writer himself, and that will come into play when we talk about his very multiply hybrid crime novels that feature both Scotland and food and drink, as well as numerous recipes. So they're crime novels that have a recipe section. At the end of them, you see a number of them here in front of us. I'll show them all later. And I'll mention a few right now. The latest of these novels, featuring the gourmet detective Angus Finson MacDonald, is Angus und die Whisky Academy, Angus and the Whisky Academy, which appeared in 2022. Its precursor, of which you'll also hear something later, is Bittere Orangen im Glas, a jar of bitter oranges, which came out in 2020. Other titles include Whisky für die Engel, Whiskey for the Angels from 2016, and Dicke Luft in der Küche, Tense Air in the Kitchen from 2017. He also writes food-related crime fiction. I think that would be a new genre, set in other locations. I found Chicago in, in Land der wilden Zwiebeln, Land of Wild Onions, of 2021. So he's branching out into other territories. We have agreed to have a question and answer format tonight. So I'll start a sort of really gentle interview with our guest, but the idea is that everyone in the audience is, of course, very welcome to come in and raise their hands at strategic points, or when we have exhausted our topics, to come in and ask your own questions. So feel free to raise your hands whenever you want to add something or ask a question of your own. Have I forgotten anything?
No, you've done a lot. Thank you very much. I'm astonished what I did.
I used a private detective to investigate on you.
It's been very nice.
Came at a price. my first question is perhaps an obvious one, but I think for writers always an interesting one. Can you still remember the moment when you conceived the idea of combining your interests in Scotland, food and crime, into a novel? The first one was called Das Auge des Feinschmeckers, The Eye of the Gourmet, in 2012. What was the key?
I had a couple of loose dots, so to speak, and I always wanted to, not always, but quite for some time. I started off as a journalist, as you know, and I'm still working as a journalist. And one day I thought to myself, it would be nice to write books too, because they keep longer. When you write for a daily newspaper, everybody knows what happens to the daily newspaper once you have read it. So, and then, as you know, I've been traveling to Scotland for the past 30 years, and had this idea of a detective, and I wanted to write something new, so to speak. That's why he's a detective, and he's only working as a detective when it's a crime against authentic food and drink. And so there's many crime novels in which the detective likes to eat, like Nero Wolfe in Rex Stout's crime novels, or other ones, plenty other ones. But as far as I know, nobody ever had this special kind of crimes he would work on. And well, I took a male detective because I'm male myself, which made it a little bit easier. But I went in Edinburgh like 20 years ago, I think it was 20 years ago, Clarissa Dixon Wright, she had a cookbook shop. She was one of the two fat ladies. She was on the BBC, you know, with the sidecar with Jennifer Patterson. And I went to her cookbook shop quite often in the old town. And one day I had this idea, and I thought to myself, it might be nice to have a detective, a male detective, as I was saying. And well, I took a detective which is slightly heavier than I am. He weighs about 150 kilos, which gives me some space to maneuver in the coming years. So I can eat a lot and would still have some left for that. And well, and then I went to a restaurant. Funny sometimes, so these things happen. And I had a very bad meal. Actually, it's in the first book, The Gourmet in English, Das Auge des Feinschmeckers. And it was supposed to be Tex-Mex kitchen, and it wasn't that at all. It was neither Tex nor Mex nor whatever. It was no kitchen whatsoever. And I put that in the book, and these were the two things. And when it first happened, that they came together, I can't really recall, maybe 15 years ago. But I can tell you that he has a sidekick, a detective at his side, Angus MacDonald, he's called Alberto Vitiello, which is a guest house owner. And as it happens, I have friends who used to have a guest house in Edinburgh. So I have a lot of stories about guests and what they did in their rooms. And so I had the two detectives and had the idea about the crimes. And that was a very long answer to your question.
Sure, well, that's a very good answer. I get a little bit worried because I've noticed in my limited reading of these novels that apparently direct autobiographical experiences end up directly in the books. So
sometimes, yeah.
If you find a video panel with questions in one of the future ones, you know where it comes from. Crime writing is of course a very lively genre. I'm not a creative writer myself, but I'd be slightly worried. I mean, you've mentioned there's so much around to choose from, but you were quite certain that you'd found a corner that hadn't been occupied yet.
That was the idea, at least. And well, but when it comes to idea, I mean, that was about the idea how I came to this first novel. But the following ones, it depends. Maybe the second one, the one to your left,
Tense air in the kitchen.
I read an article in a British and a Scottish newspaper, English newspaper, I can't recall actually. And there was this lady, an Australian lady, and she claimed, true story, she claimed to live on light alone. Her name was, I can't recall the name, was starting with a J. Anyway, And I thought that's a very funny story, because MacDonald, he weighs 150 kilos, and he has got a doctor, and he's supposed to be his fiance as well, the doctor and fiance as well, Dr. Karen Miller, and she always picks him for not losing weight. And I thought to myself, what would MacDonald think about this lady who claims to live on air alone? But that is the start of a story.
Yeah.
And light alone. And I put it in my story, it's air. She lives on air alone. So
yeah, I've tried that, and
me too. It doesn't work.
It hasn't worked.
No,
never. What my students would always be very interested in when we have active and successful writers here at the university is how difficult it was to find a publisher for the first volume. Did you really have to do a lot of persuading, or were publishers really open to the idea?
Funny that you would mention that. I actually contacted a couple of publishers, but I can tell you the truth. It wasn't the October Publishing House. It wasn't the first one. I can't remember how many it was, but a couple, maybe 10 or so. And then I always go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. I've been going there for years on end. And I, shortly before one book fair, I came across this publisher, and I went to the stand and talked to them, and they were very interested. And that was it. So I was in more or less. I sent them. I had to send them a manuscript, of course, and told them I've got some ideas for a couple of other crime novels, and we've been working together since 2012 or 2011. The first one came out in 2012, and we started in 2010, probably.
Which gives us a lot of hope for book fairs and actually live events. I mean, Frankfurt, of course, and Leipzig, the two big ones, suffered a lot when the COVID crisis was upon us. But also seems to, I mean, you've heard the stories about how often the first Harry Potter volume was rejected. So that seems to be a very common story, that you have to approach several publishers. But you seem to be, perhaps it was an accident, but I don't think it was, that actually talking to people in person to persuade them of your ideas seems to be among the keys to get things.
It's the main key, one of the main keys, but it can vary. It can be otherwise too. For example, one of my cookbooks, I got an answer, and I don't want to show off, but they answered me in like 2 days or so. That can happen too. But talking to people is never wrong. So, but usually these days it's a little bit easier compared to like 15 or 20 years ago, because we've got this famous thing called the internet. So you can always go to the website and see what they want, and I would follow the procedure. That would be my advice. For example, if you write a non-fiction book, you never send in the complete manuscript, but they tell you that on the website. Anyway.
It's now almost the same for academic books too. I mean, it's easier to publish when you've already published.
It is,
which is a bit of a vicious circle. But secondly, of course, they want to see bits, but not all of it straight away, in order to also, of course, then come up with their own suggestions. In terms of content, I found it interesting. You've actually made a point of that all the fictional cases in your novels actually have something to do with perhaps not food tampering, but the quality of food and of cooking. So there's a multiple meaning of crime in the background of your text. The Tex-Mex experience is one that I came across, and now you told us that it's actually a personal experience that you've had. So do you have a secret double mission? Not only to put Scotland on the
can I write that down? That's
for the next advertising campaign, a man with a mission. Scotland, crime, food, but in terms of promotion, I mean, there's multiple things going on. We'll talk about stereotypes of Scotland and Scottish and British food, of course. In Germany, there might be a mission there as well, but a bigger mission to campaign for good quality food.
Well, it's getting better now. I noticed the other day. I noticed there must be about 5 or 6 other books on Scottish food and drink, Scottish cookbooks in German now, and so that changed a bit. And but you're absolutely right. About 10 or 20 years ago, people were almost laughing. I like Scottish food. Oh, what is there? If you don't know the subject, you shouldn't laugh about it. And, maybe because it's not that easy to get, I don't know, Scottish food in restaurants in Scotland. If you go to guest houses and get a nice evening meal, or usually when you go on Scottish food in pubs, you can go Scottish food. But it's not that much different to Germany, actually, especially in the bigger cities like Frankfurt. To find a restaurant or German restaurant, it's not that easy. So maybe it's just because people didn't know that. Or
but I wouldn't be aware of any Scottish restaurants in the whole of Germany. I don't know a single.
I beg to differ. Okay. There's one in Darmstadt.
In Darmstadt?
It's Chris Pepper. He's an Englishman, and he's got, oh my goodness, what's it called again? I can't remember. But you find it in the internet.
Okay, I'll definitely have to check.
Okay, we contact him and he will promote our Reading Scotland series, I'm sure.
Another worthwhile contact. I did a tour of Scotland in September, and I made a point of kind of checking out also different restaurants, and I found quite a few doing what they call kind of neo Scottish or new Scottish cooking with local ingredients, and most of them were pretty good. I mean, I was very impressed. But you mentioned the old stereotype, apologies to all non-Germans present, that of course the Brits on the whole, we don't differentiate here, can't cook, right? And British food used to be one of the kind of, almost a bogeyman of international cuisine. It's like there's lots of jokes about in hell who would be the cook and who would be the policeman, and that kind of stuff. The Germans usually feature very badly in these jokes as well, but the British Isles feature very, very badly when it comes to cooking. How do you deal with stereotypes on the whole of Scotland in Germany? I mean, you're writing in German for a German audience. Do you find them useful, helpful, or do you make fun of them?
I find them extremely helpful at times. So in the latest novel, I've got this Whisky Academy, and some of the attendees, one of them is a German. And he always likes to say, "Excuse me, I know it better," like that. And so that would be an example for kind of a payback.
Okay, right. So you have stereotypes from both sides.
I do, yeah.
They're all true, of course. When I worked in Wales, I was renowned as the person who says no in debates. Rainer is the person who says no. That simply wasn't polite and very German. Okay.
It's dramatized, so it's not really.
Yeah, it's all fiction.
Only one person. So.
With the exception of the things that actually happen to the author, as we've heard. Have you attracted the attention of Visit Scotland, the Scottish tourist board? I mean, they should be interested in
not yet. Anyway, maybe because the books are only published in German so far. So
I think that might not prevent them from seeing them as interesting tools to increase the attention. I just thought, I mean, this would be another interesting network. Perhaps we can arrange something.
We invite Visit Scotland again for a Scotfest, and let's see.
We'll have some live cooking. And
well, you provide the kitchen then, but otherwise. But he's doing the work.
Yeah, but I'm sure you attract comments and letters or emails these days from readers. If you do, what do they focus on? The Scotland, the crime, or the crimes of food?
I would say it's a mixture. Depends on who writes in, and well, sometimes they ask about recipes, sometimes they ask other things, and but I can see from reviews as well what people are interested in, and well, I would say it's a mixture. So
you stressed earlier on that in terms of appearance, your detective is not like you, or not very much like you, but on the other hand, how much of you is
as tall as I am, but weighs more?
Yes, but he's a gourmet. is it he writes cookery books? So
Yes. It's sheer coincidence.
Sheer coincidence. Okay, right.
It makes it easier for me, and I like cooking. I like eating too. So
Yeah, talking about multiple mirroring here, you will learn in a few minutes that in the newest volume, his fictional detective has actually written a book with the same title as one of his. So I was wondering if there might be a well-hidden link there somewhere. Have you ever considered having your novels translated or even translating them yourself? Or
I wouldn't want to translate it myself.
yeah.
But translating, yeah, I tried that, but so far I haven't been that successful. I mean, it's not that easy. When you go to the American market, like the US market, they have so many books, and they just don't need another one by a German. And it's similar in Britain and in Scotland. And but maybe one day I wouldn't mind, actually. So.
Well, I'm warning you, there might be a translation coming up of a section from his latest book to give you a flavor in the original and then in my translation in a few minutes. But I want to switch to away from the crime to drink. Whiskey features in a lot of your titles and in a lot of the texts. I can see 1, 2, 3 whiskey-related titles here. What's your favorite one?
Oh my goodness.
Not the title, but your favorite whiskey.
Depending on the time of the day. No, I'm just kidding. It's extremely difficult to choose just one. I like peated whiskies. So if I had to choose one whiskey, it would definitely be a peated one, like from the Isle of Islay. And I like Talisker as well from Skye. But a peated one if I had to choose one. For Desert Island or something like that.
Yeah.
But I like Highland whiskies too, and there are so many whiskies these days. I mean, it changed a lot too, because like 20 or 30 years ago, we had 1 or 2 bottlings, as they say, maybe 10 years old one and a 12-year-old one. And these days, there's coming out a new whiskey almost not every day, but quite often, and so that makes it quite difficult. And but I have to confess that I don't only drink Scottish whiskies, but whiskies from other countries as well, like the USA. They make single malt too. They started making single malt whiskies too. They're quite good. Completely different, but quite good.
Yeah, I've reached Lagavulin now, but my master's thesis is dedicated to Jim Beam.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Jim Beam.
That was a weak start, yeah. As a writer of
I won't blame you for that.
Recipes, which Scottish dish other than haggis would you recommend to people outside Scotland, to German beginners who want to get a feel for Scottish food?
I like the soups, for example, like Cullen's King, and every kind of soup, because they're very great soups, and the desserts are quite good. I mean, I like everything about Scottish food, and I wouldn't want to eat haggis every day. Maybe vegetarian haggis too. I like vegetarian haggis too. So
we had this as an option.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
black beans or with lentils, it's quite good actually. And yeah, about that, yeah.
I mean, you've already mentioned going to restaurants in Scotland, of course, a lot. Any favorite ones you can recommend?
Can I recommend a Pakistani restaurant?
Okay, sure.
It was recommended to me by Clarissa Dixon White, and she recommended it to me 25 years ago. It's called the Kebab Mahal.
Oh, I know that one. It's my favorite. It's my favorite in St. Patrick's Square.
Exactly.
Oh, I only need to go in and they tell me exactly the same.
Yeah, me too. Chicken curry, cashew nuts, and naan bread, and a couple of
Kashwarina.
You do that.
Yeah.
I see. Multi-cultural Scotland.
Worth going there.
It's worth going there. It doesn't look like it, but
No,
from
not at all.
outside, not at all. But it's one of the best.
Crazy, yeah.
Yes, and I always order food that is no longer on the menu because I've been there for 10 years. It's all the same.
And they prepare it.
Yeah, they always say the same.
So that's the Kebab Mahal.
Kebab Mahal.
in St. Patrick's Square.
Take a note. Okay.
Really walk very slowly because it's not a very big restaurant, so you don't miss it.
Good.
It's on the way to the University of Edinburgh.
It is, yeah. It is, yeah.
A really massive jump in my final big question. We know what's going on in Scottish politics, and that we've had the ups and downs and the trend towards separatism, and now apparently against it. What is your vision of the future of Scotland's culture and politics? Will it become independent? Will it integrate in some form or other? Will differences disappear? Or how do you see things?
Well, I can only rely on the things you have too, so like polls and everything. And at the moment, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't look that way. I would reckon that the SNP won't get the best results at the next elections, though, and they are the only ones who've got the aim or the goal to be independent. I don't think Scottish Labour Party will do that as the Scottish National Party did. So that's that. And well, maybe in the future. I mean, it was 55 to 45.
But I've seen the record. It came out last week. There's even more now than 55, 40. I think it's 52 now to 48.
48, yeah.
So it's still increasing. So whatever the politics are with the governments, there is a stable sort of stability with independence or not independence.
Yeah.
So that should be recognized. I mean, regardless what Scotland votes, but it's the young generation who just stands up and gets counted now. And so that's what we see in Northern Ireland as well. So in 10 years' time, as we see in Northern Ireland. So don't worry about politics. We don't worry about politics.
Okay.
We don't do politics at the University of Mainz, as you know.
Not okay. I
didn't know that.
My idea was to give you a flavor of Frank Winter's writing, that I've asked him to read the opening of his latest novel, Angus and the Whisky Academy, which is short, and then I'll read to you my very imperfect translation to give the non-German speakers an idea what goes on. And I found the opening very interesting because it, as you will see, it introduces and yet doesn't introduce yet the detective figure in a very interesting way. So over to Frank Winter.
Thank you very much. Es beginnt zu brodeln. Grace Gilchrist bewegte den Kopf und kontrollierte unverzüglich ihren kunstvollen Haarturm, der leicht vibrierte. Nie hatte jemand etwas zu beanstanden gehabt an Erscheinung oder Gebaren der Chefsekretärin. Sie war makellos. Das kam nicht von ungefähr, erforderte viel Pflege und Geduld. Torquil Hasty entpuppte sich als Passant. Kein Paradevorgesetzter wie bei der letzten Anstellung. So freundlich, wenn man ihn nicht behelligte und selbst die Initiative ergriff. Heute ging sie noch weiter, setzte sich über ein ungeschriebenes Gesetz hinweg und trat ins Zimmer ihres Chefs, um ihn zu mahnen. Sir, ich will ja nicht aufdringlich sein, aber wir müssen etwas tun, dringend. Hasty saß in seinem bequemen Lederohrensessel und sah aus dem Fenster. Die Arme in der abgetragenen Tweedjacke mit Ellbogenschonern waren steif gestreckt. Sein üppiger, angegrauter Haarkranz schien den Kopf verlassen zu wollen. Hallo, Sir. Er drehte sich in ihre Richtung. Ah, Sie sind es, Grace. Wer denn sonst? Haben Sie mich verstanden, Mr. Hasty? Dringend. Bitte? Irgendetwas mit dringend, haben Sie gesagt. Heute Morgen erhielt ich einen neuen Anruf. Oh Gott. Nicht wieder dieser grässliche Stöhner. Leider eben dieser. Sie Ärmste, hätten Sie mich doch verbunden. Wie meinen? Rufen. Sie hätten mich besser rufen sollen, wenn so etwas geschieht. Schmähungen dieser Art sind in Ihrem Gehalt nicht inbegriffen. Sollte das heißen, wer mehr Geld verdiente, musste obszöne Anrufe über sich ergehen lassen? Herzlichen Dank, aber sobald etwas erwidert wird, legt der Perverse ja auf. Wie kommt's? Ich bin nur eine einfache Sekretärin und kein Psychiater. Natürlich, natürlich. Verständigen wir doch die Polizei? Bei meiner Schwester ging es ein Jahr so, ohne dass die Beamten jemanden ausfindig machten. War es immer derselbe Anrufer? In seinem großen Jacket war er so goldig unbeholfen, dass man ihn einfach mögen musste. Ja, davon gehen wir aus. Wie endete die Geschichte? Ja, die Anrufe hörten irgendwann auf. Interessant. Gilchrist wischte mit der Hand durch die Luft, als ob sie eine Fliege verscheuchen wollte. Diese Typen sind alle gleich, alle gleich. Grace, Sie tun mir leid. Danke vielmals, aber Ihre Auseinandersetzung mit den 4 Roadies wollen wir nicht vergessen. Es könnte an unserer Adresse liegen. Mit Verlaub, Sir, ich glaube nicht, das Westend ist eine sehr noble Gegend. Stimmt, stimmt, die Lümmel tauchten nicht mehr auf. Garantiert ist das kaum. Schwerlich, Grace, schwerlich. Hasty sah sie erwartungsvoll an. Könnte ich eine Tasse Tee bekommen? Die Sekretärin schüttelte den Kopf und lachte dann. Mit Vergnügen. Da die Polizei nichts ausrichten kann, scheiden private Ermittler ebenfalls aus. Auf der anderen Seite, meine Schwester kennt da diesen Privatdetektiv, ein sehr netter junger Mann. Sogenannte professionelle Privatdetektive verlangen Unsummen, ohne dass ein Resultat garantiert wird. Als Gilchrist sich Hasty Sessel näherte, wurde er unruhig. So teuer war das gar nicht, nur ein paar 100 Pfund. Nein, er klopfte mit der flachen Hand auf die Sessellehne. Ich habe die Angewohnheit, für mein Geld zu arbeiten. Tu nicht Gute, unterstütze ich nicht. Aber man könnte den Mann für einen Tag engagieren gegen pauschalisiertes Honorar. Grace, ich würde sehr gerne etwas Tee zu mir nehmen. Es ist beinahe 11 Uhr. Sie nickte, patschte auf die Ohren des hohen Sessels zum Unmut ihres Arbeitgebers, der leise stöhnte. Ich mache mich gleich dran, Mr. Hastings. Schön, meine Liebe. Nachdem sie das Zimmer verlassen hatte, rubbelte er wie wild über Wangen und Stirn. Die Anspannung der letzten Monate war übermächtig geworden, drückende Last, die nicht mit sich verhandeln ließ. Schluss jetzt, Torquil, du machst den Anruf. Sie hatte das vernommen und schätzte sich glücklich, noch nicht ins Zimmer zurückgekehrt zu sein. Sie zählte bis 3, klopfte an die Tür und trat ein. Haben Sie etwas gesagt, Sir? Nein, nur laut gedacht. Hier ist Ihr Tee, antwortete sie mit geschürzten Lippen. Wie hat sie das so schnell geschafft? Darf ich ihn eingießen? Gerne, und holen Sie sich gerne auch einen Becher aus dem Schrank. Doch nicht von Ihrer Tatenkollektion. Bitte ja. Die sind doch für besondere Anlässe. Ganz recht. Jetzt machen Sie mich neugierig. Sie ging zur Glasvitrine und nahm den ersten Becher, der ihr ins Auge fiel. Nehmen Sie Platz. Im Sitzen redet sich's besser. Ich habe mir alles durch den Kopf gehen lassen. Ihr Hinweis mit dem privaten Detektiv war nicht schlecht. Ja, wenn Sie es sagen, Mr. Hasty, pflichtete sie ihm bei, mühsam ein Grinsen zurückhaltend. So machen wir das, doch beauftragen wir keinen Hampelmann aus den gelben Seiten, sondern Angus Vincent MacDonald. Kochbuchautor MacDonald, wiederholte sie laut. Sie kennen ihn? Gerade gestern habe ich sein neues Buch durchgeblättert, bei Waterstones. Es heißt Bittere Orangen im Glas. Schöner Band. Durchaus, aber wie sollte uns dieser Gentleman denn helfen? Er ist sehr erfahren. Tja, mehr im Kochen von Marmelade, würde ich sagen. Nein, in seiner freien Zeit agiert er als Detektiv. Hatten wir nicht gesagt, private Ermittler taugen nichts und sind zu kostspielig? Hasty grinste so breit, dass sein überkronter Schneidezahn auftauchte. Er wird umsonst arbeiten. Nein, das glaube ich nicht. Will ich es Ihnen doch sagen. Dann kann er nichts taugen. Seine Erfolgsquote liegt bei 100%. Wo ist der Haken? Spannen Sie mich bitte nicht weiter auf die Folter, Sir. Es gibt keinen Haken, aber vielleicht hat er ja gar keine Zeit. Könnten wir nicht einen attraktiven Gentleman wählen? Bitte? Ich meine, der Herr wird in die Akademie kommen und wir wollen ja entsprechend repräsentiert werden, wie auch Geld verdienen. Sie reden von Äußerlichkeiten, Grace. Leider spielen die heutzutage eine große Rolle. Nicht, dass ich es als Mann gut beurteilen könnte, doch Angus sieht recht passabel aus. Wenigstens einen schlankeren Hemd? Nein, Grace. Danke, das wär's. Früh genug würde sie erfahren, dass einen zweiten wichtigen Grund hatte, Angus zu kontaktieren.
Okay, my translation
Okay.
is it's starting to simmer. Grace Gilchrist moved her head and immediately checked her elaborate beehive, which was vibrating slightly. No one had ever had anything to complain about regarding the appearance or demeanor of the chief secretary. She was flawless. That didn't happen by chance. It required a lot of care and patience. Torquil Hasty turned out to be passable, not a stellar boss like at her last job, but friendly if you didn't bother him and took initiative yourself. Today, she went even further, defying an unwritten law and entering her boss's room to admonish him. Sir, I don't mean to be intrusive, but we need to do something urgently. Hasty sat in his comfortable leather wingback chair, gazing out of the window. His arms in the worn tweed jacket with elbow patches were stiffly stretched out. His abundant graying hair seemed to want to depart from his head. Hello, sir. He turned in her direction. It's you, Grace. Who else? Did you understand me, Mr. Hasty? Urgent, please. You said something about urgent. This morning I received another call. Oh God, not that horrible groaner again. Unfortunately, yes, that one. Poor thing. You should have transferred him to me. What do you mean? You should have called me. Such incidents are not included in your salary. Did that mean those who earned more money had to endure obscene calls? Thank you very much, but as soon as something is said in response, the pervert hangs up. Why is that? I'm only a simple secretary, not a psychiatrist. Of course, let's call the police. When it happened to my sister, it went on for a year without them finding the culprit. Was it always the same caller? In his large jacket, he was so cutely helpless, one simply had to like him. This is what we assumed. How did the story end? The calls stopped eventually. Interesting. Gilchrist swiped her hand through the air as if she wanted to get rid of a fly. These types are all the same. Grace, I'm sorry for you. Thanks a lot, but we mustn't ignore your argument with the 4 ruffians. It might have to do with our address. With respect, sir, I don't believe that. The West End is a very genteel area. True, the idiots have not returned. But we cannot be sure of this. Hardly, Grace, hardly. Hasty looked at her with some expectation. Might I have a cup of tea? The secretary shook her head and laughed. With pleasure. Since the police could not help, private investigators are also off the menu. On the other hand, my sister knows this private detective, a very nice young man. So-called private detectives ask for tons of money without guaranteeing a result. When Gilchrist approached Hasty's chair, he became restless. It wasn't all that expensive, only a couple of £100. No, he beat the armrest of his chair with the palm of his hand. I've made it a habit to work for my money. I do not support good-for-nothings. You could hire the man for a day for a flat fee. Grace, I would very much like to have some tea. It's almost 11 o'clock. She nodded, patting the ears of the high-backed chair, much to the annoyance of her employer, who groaned softly. I'll get right to it, Mr. Hasty. Good, my dear. After she had left the room, he rubbed his cheek and forehead vigorously. The tension of the past months had become overwhelming, a pressing burden that couldn't be negotiated with. Enough now, Torquil. You make the call. Gilchrist had heard this and was relieved not to have returned to the room yet. She counted to 3, knocked on the door, and entered. Did you say something, sir? No, just thinking out loud. Here's your tea, she replied with pursed lips. How had she managed that so quickly? May I pour for you, please, and feel free to grab a cup from the cupboard. From your tartan collection? Yes, please. But those are for special occasions, exactly. Now you've piqued my curiosity. She went to the glass cabinet and took the first cup that caught her eye. Have a seat. It's easier to talk sitting down. I've been mulling over something. Your suggestion about the private detective wasn't bad. If you say so, Mr. Hasty, she agreed, struggling to hold back a grin. So let's do this. But let's not just hire any man from the Yellow Pages. Let's get Angus Stinson MacDonald. Cookbook author MacDonald, she repeated aloud. You know him? Just yesterday I browsed through his new book at Waterstones. It's called A Jar of Bitter Oranges. An attractive volume? Quite, but how might this gentleman help us? He's very experienced. More in the cooking of marmalade, I should say. In his spare time, he works as a detective. Didn't we say private investigators are no good and too costly? Hasty grinned so widely that his crowned incisor appeared. He'll work for free. I don't believe that. If I tell you so, then he can't be any good. His success rate is 100%. What's the catch, sir? Please don't string me along any further. There's no catch, but perhaps he might not be free. Couldn't we choose a more attractive gentleman? Excuse me? I mean, the gentleman will come to the academy, and we need to be suitably represented as well as making money. You're talking about appearances, Grace. Unfortunately, they play a major role nowadays. Not that I could judge that well as a man, but Angus looks quite passable. What about a slimmer gentleman? No, Grace, thank you. That will be all. She would learn soon enough that he had another important reason for wanting to get in touch with Angus. And there we have the opening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's the end of my part, but I'm happy to open the floor to comments and questions.
What is the recipe in that book then?
There's more than one, but perhaps you can.
Actually, it's I think it's exactly 20 recipes, all vegetarian ones, and I think 15 or 16 of them vegan. And I try to combine Scottish food and drink with vegan and vegan recipes. And for example, I've got a green vegetarian BBQ haggis, or the other way around.
There's
BBQ
whiskey risotto in here as well that I
Exactly,
find particularly interesting.
I thought to myself, why always use white wine or stuff like that? Because I had whiskey at home. Usually I have whiskey at home, so I tried it with whiskey and it worked.
And there's a gentle nod to Germany in the omelette filled with sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Which I suppose might be a bit of a surprise to many Scottish.
Don't forget the cheese. Cheese as well.
Okay.
It depends. I like to promote, coming back to your question, I like to promote Scottish food and drink. And so I've got, the first one is cooking with the whiskey, actually. And the second one, cooking with oats. And then we've got the third one, that's Scottish Highland recipes, because mostly plays in the Highlands, the story. And number 4, curries for connoisseurs. So obviously it's Indian cuisine, like like curries.
Did you nick some recipes from your favorite?
No, I
They
wouldn't.
wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that.
Even if they did that, I would never. Okay. No, the recipes are all, I made them all myself. So I invented them and I tried them many times because I've got a huge cookbook collection. I hate it when the recipes don't work. So it's kind of a habit to try it and try it again if it doesn't work. And
So what takes longer, to write the book or to cook through the book?
oh, that's a difficult one. I would say first I write the book, or I write a new chapter, and at night time, because I have to eat, I have to get nutrition.
Yeah.
I cook. Once I've written a chapter, I cook.
Okay.
Maybe not. Most definitely, the book it takes more time to write the book. So, and but I never stopped it. Right? No, definitely the book. Yeah. Because I like cooking so much, I never look for the clock or for the time.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Any questions, suggestions, comments from your side?
The one opportunity not available perhaps to yourself is the Ian Rankin, the writer of a lot of novels. In one of his novels, he praises the Witchery restaurant, which is up just near the castle, and I presume that then got him a lot of free dinners. But if you're based in Germany, so there would not be an opportunity for you to praise particular restaurants, because unless you choose to visit. So.
That's a very good idea. I could start promoting whiskies, actually. No, I'm just kidding. No, that wouldn't work for me, like you said, because I do live in Germany, and I wouldn't promote something. I've got a lot.
Raised pepper, you said. Raised pepper from Darmstadt.
Well, he's a dear friend of mine, so
Okay.
And doesn't feature in the novels yet, but
and you won't regret it because it's quite good actually. It does whiskey tastings too.
I think that Scotland isn't entirely a sort of a food desert. There's been quite a change with things like restaurants producing their meals from locally grown food and so on, and there's been some quite good results. But I take your point about, well, soup being a sort of a major, has always been a major feature. Perhaps the only way that some people in Scotland get their vegetables is in a soup. And James Kelman has got a short story which consists of a man thinking about making soup, which when he read it several years ago was very funny. It didn't seem quite so funny when I read it, but I think he read it with feeling, with chopping up the sort of the different sort of vegetables and so on. But are you? There's quite another writer, Denise Miner, said that people who like crime fiction are hungry readers. You know, that if you read crime, this is why I have limited my intake to a few writers. That you want to read a lot of crime fiction if you want to get a taste for it. So. And that is shown in sort of the Tartan Noir sort of festival that's held in the. I mean, are there not public opportunities to get your work published in Scotland at least, or?
Not yet. So far, not yet. Unfortunately, I tried it a couple of times, but no, not yet.
There are some, very small publishers. You know, if you, I mean, what sometimes happens is people get one firm to publish and then move on somewhere else. But I could inquire if it, but you need. The trouble is, you need an English translation, doesn't it? So, but even some friends who write America from the USA living in Scotland, they've had their work translated. Well, one of them has had his work translated in Spain. You know, so it seems to be nowadays there's I suppose you can go quite a long way with some sophisticated translation programs, and then correct them from the more obvious errors.
They're quite good these days. You're absolutely right. It changed a lot compared to like 10, 15 years ago. It's not perfect, but almost perfect. I mean, you don't have to correct that much. And I have a translation, as it happens, the first 10 or 12 pages made by a British translator of the first novel, and I've got a translation of first, as I said, 10 or 12 pages, and we've got another translation of this one. So.
That's right. So we're getting there.
Keep trying. I mean, as Michael has said, I mean, it's not just into English, but into other languages as well. I think
it's a very good idea.
Yes, there's always.
Thanks for recommending
markets there.
Italy, maybe, exactly, because they like to go
they like cooking. They like cooking.
They like traveling to Scotland as well. There are many.
Spaniards.
Spaniards too.
Yes. But I actually read this one here.
You did?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
172 recipes. I haven't been through them yet, but I found some of them I read in Scottish cookery books, and they sounded so complicated. So you cut it down for me to the main ingredients, which was good, because some of them you can't get in Germany if you're following the Scottish recipes. But I found particularly interesting is the cultural twist on this, that you explain where it's coming from. And one question I have is, I always learned that Scotland's Scottish food consists of what they just have. In other words, they can make do with whatever is available. Oats or really poor diet in a way is historically connected to the poverty. Is that the case? Would you